Good morning, Joint Committee members. Can I welcome you to the last Joint Committee meeting for 2023? And it's lovely to see the staff here, and Nima, Lily and Matt, and also Melinda, who will be speaking to us very shortly. Firstly, can I ask Councillor Pike for the Karakia?
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te taonga. Ke makinakina ki uta, ke mataratara ki tai, e he ake ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hau hu, ti hei mauri ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Pike. Firstly, before we move on to apologies, can I just make you, Dave, if I can pass to you about the health and safety statement on agenda page 6, please.
Good morning, members. This is just a casual reminder of the health and safety provisions around the chambers here. I'll give a brief update this time. Future meetings will take it as read, so you don't have to go through this each time, and I'll call for questions. But should an emergency occur, you'll hear a siren in the chamber here and follow the directions of staff. The fire exit is out the main doors of the chamber and to the right. We will gather on Tristram Street, and please do not walk onto the road. There will be road crossing attendants come along when the time comes, if required. If we do need to leave the building, please don't use the lift. Not that you would, because that's going in the wrong direction, but stick with the stairs, thanks. If you need help leaving the chamber or the building, please let me know and we'll provide assistance. Should there be an event and reception, a duress light will appear in the chamber. If that happens, we may ask you to remain in the chamber or go through to the council lounge. Again, just follow instructions. And lastly, if required, there is a defibrillator in reception, and I really hope that we don't have to use it because I can't even say the word. And lastly, there is a flip chart in the entranceway and also in the councillors' lounge with more detailed health and safety instructions. But if there's any questions, just let us know at any stage.
Are there any questions or points of clarity of Dave? There being none, this will appear regularly in the agenda and will just be taken as read, like the terms of reference. Moving on, firstly, can I just welcome Waikato Regional Councillor Noel Smith from Waikato DC. Nice to see you, Noel. It's been a while. And then we'll move on to apologies, of which there are a few, being that December is quite the busy time. We have Mayor Church, Waikato District Council, Deputy Mayor Williams and Councillor Jeffries of Otrahonga District Council, Councillor Russell Smith, Maramara Piako, and Deputy Chair Councillor Brown from Waipa. We also have apologies from our KEG Chair, Susan Law, but welcome Langley here today. Can I have a mover and a seconder for those, please? Thank you, Councillor Ngataki and Councillor Lee. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We'll now move on to the confirmation of the agenda. Everybody happy with that? Happy to move? Just in regards to the resolution, we've added a second point that the order of items shall be set out in the meeting minutes, because I am going to switch a couple of items around. But if I can have a mover and seconder for that, sorry, is that Councillor Buckthorpe, Councillor Pike, all those in favour? Against? Carried. We move on to disclosures of interest. I would just like to point out that under item 16, appointment of local controllers, I have a perceived conflict of interest with a recommendation for Taupo District Council. I will not comment on this item, considering that there are a few. We're probably all a bit conflicted in this. So I will remain in the chair, but will not offer any comments, but happy to answer any questions. Is everyone okay with that? Great. Do I have to move in second disclosures? No. Then we move on to the confirmation of minutes from the 30th of October, which was a very short and sharp meeting regarding the emergency management submission, just like how we like to roll, Councillor Ngataki. Right, has anyone got any points of clarity or questions from that? There being none, can I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Goddard, Councillor Lee, all those in favour? Against, carried. We'll move on to item 7, which is the 2024 schedule of meetings. Dave, do you have any comments on this?
I'm going to keep this very brief. These meetings, I'll take the report as read. The dates that have been selected have been worked around other background events, key meetings and whatnot. We're just seeking for you to receive the report and adopt those 4 meetings for 2024.
Thank you. Before we move on for a seconder, can I just ask Dave, around the long-term plan, what is the joint committee's involvement in that from a governance perspective in regards to, I mean, I know it's not a meeting date, but there must be speaking to a submission or further dates required around that. Julian?
So, Madam Chair, my understanding is that we may be required to talk to any submissions that are made around the emergency management part of the LTP, but until we know what those submissions are and whether there's anything to talk about. But there is an expectation that if there are submissions made, that there will be somebody requested to talk to those submissions.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that, Julian. So we have a mover for the proposed dates. Can I have a seconder for those, please? Councillor Buckthorpe, thank you. All those in favour? Against, carried. Right, this is where I'm going to use my chance, and I'm going to actually move agenda item number 11 up next, which is the after action review update. So I welcome Melinda to the chair, but Julian, perhaps I can leave it for you to introduce the item, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So we've got Melinda Meads with us this morning from Simplexity. The purpose being to provide you with the findings of the after action report, or after action review, I should say, that was undertaken in the Waikato CDM group after the North Island severe weather events of early 2023. So just a bit of background for Melinda. Melinda works for Simplexity, which is an independent contractor, but Melinda's got a long history or a long knowledge with our group, which is good because she's previously undertaken our monitoring evaluations and as a private contractor and previously when it was the Ministry of Civil Defence Emergency Management. So that continuity is very beneficial. So the background to this is that we do have a policy around just the context of why we've gone for an independent review. We have a policy in the region adopted in 2018 that has a number of triggers and thresholds for different kinds of reviews. The fact that we had multiple declarations in the region automatically says that we should have by default, we should have an independent review. Hence, we commissioned Simplexity to undertake that. So the next steps, you'll hear from Melinda this morning, the next steps after listening to the report is to undertake an alignment of the recommendations provided by Simplexity to those recommendations that currently form our group plan priority work list, and to come up with a proposed new work programme and new set of priorities for KEG and yourselves to consider at the next round of meetings. So.
Morena, good morning, everyone. Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to address the Joint Committee this morning. And first of all, I'd just like to send an apology from Jane Rowland, who is my colleague that I work with, who was unable to be here this morning. Also, I'd just like to acknowledge the ongoing recovery across the Waikato, in particular with Thames Coromandel and Waikato districts, and also Waitomo district with their roading network challenges. Just to highlight upfront, Julian has highlighted the after action review policy, which is a strength, hence the reason I'm sitting here presenting to you today. Also would like to acknowledge a strength with the Waikato in its people, the staff that supported both the response and ongoing recovery efforts right across the Waikato. Next slide, please. What I'm going to cover this morning is twofold, just some contextual information around the review and the weather events that it's associated with. So that's Cyclone Hale, the Auckland Anniversary Severe Weather Event, and also Cyclone Gabriel. Also, I'll cover this presentation will focus on the review findings, so around areas of strength, innovation, and also areas for improvement. Next slide, please. Just with review context. So first of all, as I said, the review covers the 3 weather events we had in the first part of the year: Cyclone Hale, Auckland Anniversary Severe Weather Events, and Cyclone Gabriel. The impacts across the Waikato were to the extent that all local authorities activated response arrangements, some more than others, and there were significant impacts in particular in Thames Coromandel, Waikato, Waitomo and Karakia districts. States of emergency, there were 5 declared across the region, 2 for the Auckland Severe Weather Event with Waitomo and Thames Coromandel, and then for Cyclone Gabriel, there was Thames Coromandel, Waikato, Karakia, then the group area local declaration, closely followed by the national declaration. The approach for the review, we had several approaches. The first being a survey which was sent out to all staff at group and local level who supported the responses over all 3 events. And you'll see that there were over 128 responses to that survey. This survey was anonymous on purpose, so there was no identifiable data, so there was some free and frank contribution to that survey. We also did a series of interviews, both at group and local level as well, and those were face-to-face and also online. Then to accompany those, we did a series of debrief sessions, which were with the 2 main advisory groups, Lifelines and the Welfare Coordination Group that were involved in the response efforts, as well as sessions at group and local level with key staff in response leadership roles. We also conducted a review of documentation, which included group policies and procedures, debriefing reports and national guidelines. There are 20 recommendations in the report. This presentation, as I said, will be focused on the report findings or the review findings. Next slide, please. So the Waikato CDM group did well. The recommendations the recommendations in the report would have made no significant difference to the outcomes and how the Waikato responded this year. But the recommendations we've made will help the Waikato CDM group moving forward and also for a longer duration event. The Waikato CDM group had a controller policy in place, and this was a strength in that it enabled controllers to work together across the region. There are several local authorities that needed additional controller support, and this policy enabled this to occur at very short notice. Thames Coromandel had significant impacts, and there were moderate impacts for Waikato and Waitomo districts. And also to mention Karakia in there as well. There were other community impacts across other areas, but these were minor or less significant than those. Considering the devastation of neighbouring CDM groups, the Waikato was minor in comparison, with the exception of Thames Coromandel. Declarations followed due process and were warranted given the circumstances across all the local states of emergency declared. Some of the elected members and the mayors were more experienced than others, and our interviews highlighted there was an appetite for ongoing training to support elected members and mayors. The needs of the community were at the forefront in decision making right across the Waikato. And the local delivery was once again a highlight and a strength across the Waikato and was very effective. The cumulative weather events in the first part of their year did take a toll on staff, and that was highlighted a lot in our survey and also in our review interviews, particularly emergency management professional staff. Consistency and response. While there are programs and tools in place, uptake right across the Waikato was a challenge. There wasn't always a shared understanding of how things are done at each individual local authority level. The recommendations that we've made with systems and processes for consistency are already underway. Another focus is training. The Waikato CDM group delivered some sound response outcomes during response, but there was, once again, interviews and the survey highlighted that there could be more training. Once again, this is an action that is already underway and is also part of normal CDM work programs. Given the span of the Waikato, both with systems and processes for consistency and training, this can be a challenge, and that was noted in the report. Next slide, please. Just further a focus on strengths, and I have already highlighted this, but right across the CDM group, there was a unanimous support and response around the strength that staff at both regional group and local level provided to the response. 98% of survey respondents felt like they were making a meaningful contribution. Staff felt valued and were valued during all those response efforts. Scientific intelligence, the Waikato Regional Council flood team were instrumental in the dissemination of hazard information and warnings across the Waikato region, which supported the timely decision-making in the responses. Controller capacity, I've already highlighted the group controllers policy, and this provided a strength at both regional and at group and local level. Response operations, some of those strengths further to highlight were that staff were committed. There was support from executive and governance across the responses. Having liaison staff in agencies was also highlighted as a strength, and most importantly, relationships with communities. Community response groups, marae, and other elements that stood up to support the welfare arrangements were very effective right across the Waikato. There is a strength in public information management capability at local level with dedicated and experienced public information managers, and these roles are seamlessly transitioned from normal council communications roles. Stakeholder relationships in the first part of the year and also across the Waikato in general are a strength, in particular those agencies that supported Thames Coromandel and also highlighting the New Zealand Defence Force response to support Thames Coromandel in that space. Support to communities, just to highlight this further, the relationships with iwi at the local level, in particular with marae that supported the response, was a strength. Community-led responses through community-led centres and also civil defence centres, and also welfare coordination. The welfare coordination group have strong relationships which actually enabled some challenges to be worked out very quickly in the response, in particular with the border issues where some of the communities in Waikato district required support from Auckland flood events, and there was just some challenges making sure that those communities received the support that they needed, and those relationships that the region of the Waikato Welfare Committee had enabled that to be resolved quite quickly. Finally, just on response, on strengths, the transition to recovery and the establishment of the Group Recovery Office allowed recovery issues right across multiple agencies and the Cyclone Recovery Unit to be enabled quickly. This advocacy is to be commended and highlights the strengths that the Group Recovery Office has and still has in supporting local level recovery. Next slide, please. There are a number of elements of innovation across all three responses. First of all, the welfare needs system here to help you. This system was implemented during Cyclone Gabriel and particularly supported both Thames Coromandel and Waikato districts. This innovation provided another tool to support welfare service delivery at the local level. In response operation, there are a series of innovative elements that included use of drones for situational awareness, also linking photographic photos of damage and impact through Google Maps back to situational awareness, and also the use of Whisper, especially for staff notification. Also in the innovation space, recovery and the efforts in particular by Thames Coromandel and Waikato districts to use all mechanisms they could lay their hands on for funding in the recovery space is to be commended. And those kind of practices should continue and be used for future recoveries across the Waikato. Whether those recoveries are formal or not. There were a series of funding mechanisms that were used, certainly supported both those councils in particular. Next slide, please. The areas of improvement, and I'd just like to note up front that there is a lot of corrective actions that were already underway through group work programs, and those will be strengthened post this report, and those corrective actions will be added to. First of all, with governance, and I did highlight that across governance in the response, there was a unanimous appetite to have ongoing training for mayors and elected members, and particularly upskilling around declarations in practice and media training. In response capability, systems and processes at the group and local level, which includes action planning, cross-boundary relationships, support to GIS, support with post-event debriefing and public information management were all highlighted as areas that needed improvement, that as I highlighted at the start, they would not have changed the outcome of how the Waikato responded. It's more for the future. Also in improvements, roles and responsibilities could be strengthened, in particular around the roles and responsibilities between Regional Council, the GMO and the Group Emergency Coordination Centre, just on the transition of those arrangements from BAU to a response setting. In the welfare space, some local authorities have and use their local welfare coordination committees effectively. Some of those committees are not in existence at the moment. So we have recommended that those committees be established if they aren't already, or more formalised and then utilised to enable responses moving forward. Also with community-led centres and civil defence centres, whilst those were used effectively, what was highlighted was the need of the staff to support those centres. So we've highlighted that as an area of improvement moving forward. There are a series of documents that require strengthening. The Waikato CDM Group Response Framework was one of those, and I understand there's action underway to already review that document. It was also highlighted that the regional CDM Māori framework also required some review, and we have recommended that a review of that framework be undertaken in line with the co-design work program that this forum has recommended. Training. I've highlighted that as an area that is right across the region, will provide consistency in approach across the Waikato, given the challenge with the span with 11 local authorities. Some of that training is already in practice and underway, but we've recommended some training, that training be established for the Pohati and iwi Māori roles, and also further training with action planning, leadership in response, and just strengthening some pieces around the reimbursement piece for response as well. As I said, a lot of these are already underway. We have highlighted in the report that the Puahari iwi Māori engagement roles are a capability risk to the Waikato CDM group. Next slide, please. This presentation just provides you with a snapshot of the strengths, the innovation, and also the areas for opportunity for improvement. It is to be highlighted that the Waikato CDM group should celebrate those strengths and innovation which do outweigh the improvements that we have recommended. Also, through you, Chair, Julian's already highlighted around those that they're being worked into a work program, and a lot of those recommendations are already underway. Next slide, please. That brings me to the conclusion of my presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions or clarification of any points that I've made during this presentation.
Thank you, Melinda, and I really welcome this review and the findings. I think that, you know, to come out of it not having any areas of improvement would show that the job hadn't been done properly, and you and Jane have done a very thorough job, and I thank Simplicity for that. Any questions from members? Councillor Ngataki?
Oh, just really around the presentation. Thank you for the presentation. Quite interesting. It's a different read from what we read in our papers. Just wondering if we get a copy.
Is that possible to get a copy? Thank you, Dave. We'll organise that. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Buckthorpe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was going to ask that too, Candy, because no, it's a good presentation. Thank you, Melinda. One question I had was your organisation, did you do the review for the Hawke's Bay region as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, no. We did provide Hawke's Bay some initial support with some of their operational survey pieces, but the Hawke's Bay review is being undertaken by Bush International Consulting, and I understand that review is still underway.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments from Julian or Langley from a GMO or a KEG perspective at all?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I think Melinda touched on it in terms of there are a number of actions here that when, and this is why we need a few months now just to consolidate all of this. What we've noticed is there are the training theme, the consistency theme, the engagement piece, and the knowledge. Given there are some recurring themes if we go back to our 2020 COVID review, if we go back to our M&E in 2019, and even if we go back as far as the review into Kaikoura, for example, or Christchurch, there are some themes here. So what we now need to do is say, is this just the nature of a disaggregated or devolved model where people don't engage in CDM on a frequent basis, therefore it's going to be alien and uncomfortable and the training element is always going to come out? Or do we need to prioritize training right up front because there's a theme and that theme hasn't been addressed adequately? So that's the work we need to go to. A number of these recommendations, the 20 recommendations, are recommendations that we have had before. We just need to understand whether that's telling us a story or whether it's just the nature of how civil defence is done. But that's part of the work we've got to do now.
Sure. Any further comment, Langley, or?
No, just that, you know, the next critical step for us is the report back in March in terms of what it means on our program, and then we'll look at whether we have to reprioritise, etc. To aim for anything, I guess the best return on our investment. So again, we thank Melinda for her review, and you know, it's always useful having a look back, particularly on these more significant events, just to make sure we've got this continuous improvement and learning from our experiences.
Right, thank you. Firstly, can I welcome Councillor Grant from TCDC? Councillor Grant, you had a question?
Thanks very much, and appreciate the opportunity and the amount of work that has gone into this. So just acknowledge that. Can I just clarify with this how far the research actually went? So I appreciate that it was done by staff and the CDM staff. It also refers to elected members. Did it go beyond that into any of the regional groups and to actual people impacted by the cyclone?
Through you, Madam Chair. So no, we did not talk directly to communities. That was outside the scope of the review. For Thames Coromandel, the elements who we spoke to, or any of the elected front, was only the mayor that we did speak to, and we spoke to those staff, so right across council, that were involved in the response. So not only the CDM professional staff, but other council staff that were involved as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the end of your question, Councillor Grant?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. I just want a clarification of the extent of the work that was done on it.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or queries of Melinda? There being none, Melinda, yeah, thank you so much. I've been involved in governance of emergency management for the best part of a decade, if not a bit longer, and I'm always keen for more training, upskilling and media training, and I only welcome those opportunities. And I'm sure elected members hopefully take that view that this is a positive thing and we need to go away and be the best that we can be, basically. So the recommendation is that the report be received. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ngātaki, Councillor Lee. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you so much for your time today, Melinda, and please give our best to Jane.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. We now move on to back to agenda item number 8, which is the recovery policy. Irving Young. Thank you. Good morning, Irving. Just need to think that's it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Referring to item 8 and attachment 1 of this report, the current recovery managed policy was adopted in November 2022 and focused on each council having access to a recovery manager within their own council. The existing policy does not provide for local recovery managers to perform CDM Act powers in any other local authority area, and this is a challenge during an extended transition period. The intention of the proposed amendment is to increase the resilience of the recovery manager cadre and to enable suitably qualified and experienced recovery managers to have the relevant CDM Act recovery powers across Waikato during a transition period. It's important to note that the long-term recovery beyond transition period remains the responsibility of the relevant council, a recovery manager, and this is outside the scope of the review of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. So how would you like to run through this? Are you taking it as read and asking for questions, or are there things you'd like to highlight in the policy, changes to the policy perhaps? Julian?
If I can just, I suppose, support Irvin's conversation here. So the changes to the policy are highlighted in red for track change for ease of reference purpose. But this is a relatively new policy that ordinarily would not have been reviewed. It's due for review after 3 years. The learning, if you looked at the recent learning from the North Island severe weather events, what that showed was having a bigger pool of local controllers would assist moving people around. But we're also very, very clear it's only in that transition period. It is not for long-term recovery. So I know, for example, Thames Coromandel District Council have employed a recovery lead externally based on the focus area for them. This would not seek to replace that, would not seek to go beyond the transition period. It is just those emergency powers. So the changes are not significant in terms of, and actually the changes are our policy of having one, our original policy of having one recovery manager per district, actually it limits the Act allows you, the recovery managers, to actually be recovery managers all over the region. We limit it in the policy because some councils, quite understandably, when recovery can mean lots of dollars and can mean lots of long-term planning. So we limited it originally. What we're saying is we're just extending it a bit now, or we want to extend it a bit now, but only to those transition powers. We're still not stepping into your long-term recovery planning area. It actually aligns with the controller policy very neatly. The controller policy does exactly the same thing. It allows local controllers to operate where they've got the appropriate experience to operate anywhere within the region. This is just a reflection of that.
Thank you, Julian. And I see that part of the resolution is the inclusion of section 4.3 around the tiers of recovery managers. And I actually really welcome that and find great comfort with that, because like controllers, you need to know when the rubber hits the road that you have the right people with the right experience in place for resilience, if not anything else. Are there any other comments or questions of Irving or Julian regarding the recovery managers policy? There being none, the recommendation is that the report be received. 2, the Joint Committee note the inclusion of section 4.3 tiers of recovery managers. Proposed amendment to the group recovery management policy. And 3, that the recovery management policy as attached to the report is approved and adopted by the Joint Committee. Just firstly, Langley, I presume this has all been through Keeg and they're happy with it?
Through you, Madam Chair, very much so. And I think the salient point that Julie made is it now brings it in line with the controller policy, which at the time I thought was leading the country in terms of having that pool of people available so that we can, provided you have sufficient training and that you know the hazardscape of a wider range of local authorities, that you can work anywhere. So it gives us, great resilience.
Yes.
So yeah, it's for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. It just aligns it with that controller policy, which is, in my view, best practice.
Perfect, thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Buckthorpe, Deputy Mayor Goddard. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We move on to agenda item number 9, deployment policy. So, Aaron, welcome you to this Monday morning, December.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Aaron.
So I'm relating to item 9, the Waikato CDM Group Deployment Policy Review. I'll take the report as being read, and I've provided the amendments to the policy have been provided in a track changes document. The Group Emergency Management Office conducted a planned review of the currently approved group deployment policy as approved by the Joint Committee. The amended policy aims to enhance health, safety and wellbeing of staff and volunteers, speed up deployment and provide flexibility of deployment length to improve response and recovery. The review sought to clarify roles and responsibilities and improve policy outcomes based on findings from recent internal and external deployments and was workshopped with CDM professionals. The changes align the Waikato CDM Group with the NEMA Director's guidelines covering emergency management sector deployments, which is due for release and publishing this month. Keeg has endorsed the proposed changes at the meeting held on the 17th of November 2023. Are there any questions on the proposed amendments to the current policy?
Members, any questions for Aaron? Emma, is that hand up or just thinking? Just thinking. Can I just make a comment, Aaron? I really like this. This brings well-being into the policy as well. So I really welcome that. I think it just shows more of a personal touch around looking after those that are deployed into different situations, which unfortunately are becoming more regular. So there are no questions or comments on that. Councillor Buckthorpe.
Just it might be nothing, but just how it reads in the recommendations, Madam Chair, is it refers to the group deployment policy. Do we need to put amendments to the group deployment policy?
We
Or
can
not?
do. we certainly can do that. That the, what was,
That the proposed amendments, or is it necessary or not?
Julian?
Yeah. The honest answer is I'm not 100%, but I would just say this has been reviewed as part of the normal review process. So I suspect this is a new, I don't know if it's an amendment or if it's actually, it's a new policy.
Yes, so the recommendation refers to the as attached, so as it is, if you as a committee were wanting to make some amendments to that policy, then you would change that recommendation, that as to what was included in the agenda, you would then say as amended. So it's just essentially it's a new policy.
Are you happy with that, councillor Buckthorpe, that we proceed as, okay, there being no questions or points of clarity, the recommendation is that the report be received, and 2, that the Waikato CDM Group deployment policy is approved and adopted by the Joint Committee. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Lee, Councillor Ngataki, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Aaron, for your time. We move on to item 10, which is, okay, Aaron, I'll retract the thank you to a bit later. The capability development strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So item 10, the Waikato CDM Group Capability Development Strategy. I've taken the report as read. The Waikato CDM Group approved an integrated training and exercise strategy in 2012. Due to developments in training and exercising, the strategy is no longer fit for purpose. This new strategy assists in aligning the Waikato CDM groups with other groups, in particular Wellington, Bay of Plenty, Auckland, Hawke's Bay and Canterbury, and will assist in improving national interoperability during response. The strategy aligns with the National Plan 2015 and several of our group plan priority actions. This currently will not change how we are currently training our emergency management staff, but will put the structure in place and defines who, how, and why we are training. An annual training and exercise plan will support the delivery across the CDM group area and formalise training pathways, training time commitments, and aspirational training targets. KEG has endorsed the strategy at the meeting held on the 17th of November 2023. Are there any questions?
Great, thank you, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron? I just on page 42 to do with council elected members and executive leadership team, and certainly KEG as well. I know that it's probably quite impossible, but I think I feel like we work in silos a little bit, and if perhaps there was an opportunity in 2024 to perhaps all get together for whether it's a forum with presentations or a meet and greet or something, just to bring everyone together. To me, it seems a bit like hard work, but if there was an opportunity to do that for the Waikato, I just think that would just show that we're taking these policies seriously, that it's not packets of work that are there in times of need, but that we can somehow form relationships between governance and executive. So if the committee is happy with that request, it's something that I'd be quite keen to see as chair. Yeah. Okay, so no questions, no points of clarity for Aaron?
Just a comment,
Councillor
Madam Chair.
Buckthorpe.
Just the training days, like there's 4 training days set out for next year. I think they're a really important part of the process with this capability, and I was part of the hierarchy, one of the hierarchy training days recently, and I found it really valuable as a member of the governance committee, just watching how it all works. Because yeah, like you say, I feel like sometimes we're just too far removed from the coalface to understand. We should have better integration to understand our roles a lot better. So I'm all for committee members getting involved in those training days.
Absolutely, and we're just obviously keeping the governance and operations or executive line in the sand and being very aware and understanding of that. I too am very fortunate that I get to observe and be a part of training exercises. Had a great one down in Wairuru when We were deployed into a district that was not ours, obviously. And the mayor and deputy mayor were unable to be in the East EOC. So I was the governance link for the neighbouring district with information. So there's all sorts of different scenarios where I think governance can play a role without putting their fingers in a pie that they don't need to. So yeah, thank you for that. So the recommendation is that the report be received, and 2, that the Waikato CDM Group Capability Development Strategy is approved and adopted by the Joint Committee. Can I have a mover and a seconder? That please. Thank you, Councillor Pike. Councillor Buckthorpe, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, we now move to item 12, which is the response and recovery cost 2013-2023. Julian.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide the Joint Committee with a response and recovery expense update, or an unbudgeted response and recovery expenses update for the last 10 years of 2013 to 23. The background to this being at the meeting of the 19th of June, members requested that the details of the previous 10 years average unbudgeted cost for response and recovery be provided. So we've done some work around that and come up with the annual average for unbudgeted response and recovery costs, or transition costs, that being, over the last 10 years is actually $388,064. When you remove the lowest and the highest outliers, that puts the average down to $270,287. The thing to note here, because the context of this request, from my recollection, the context of this request was when we were moving budgets around to basically offset or cover unbudgeted costs. And I think there was possibly an appetite to start thinking about, and we've had the conversation previously, around creating a reserve, a response reserve, and trying to have a look at that. Now, the narrative I'd give around that is, given the majority of our response and recovery and budgeted spend has also been, not every time, but the majority of the times, has also been accompanied by a BAU underspend. This was discussed at KEG, and one of the options that KEG proposed or discussed was actually, rather than creating a response budget and increasing targeted rates in the environment that we currently are, we could look at reducing the work program by circa 15%. So what we're actually doing is creating the response budget within existing rate take. So that, of course, if we go down that route, that of course means that we're aiming not to deliver as much as we would if there was 100%, but I think it's a recognition of BAU work. I think it's a recognition of the fact over the last 10 years, we have probably lost 15% of our BAU budget time to response. So I've given you what you asked for, which was what is the average cost, annual cost over the last 10 years. And if you take out the highest and the lowest, it's circa $270,000. But if the conversation was going to go down the line of, do we need a response to rate for response budget, then KEG have come up with an alternate for that doesn't increase the rate take. It just reduces how much work you can expect from the group in the business as usual. Should there, and that will cover the response ordinarily.
Thank you, Julian. I just, before I ask for questions, I would have thought that if you were had to activate that 15% for recovery or response, then you're not going to achieve your BAU anyway. So yeah, I think it's worth giving it a go myself. But any questions? Councillor Lee?
Yeah, good morning. I'd be a little bit uncomfortable about taking that 15% out of the business as usual. I'd probably be more inclined to put a rate in, like it won't be much. And you've still got that fallback of that 15% from the BAU as well. So Just an opinion.
Right, thank you, councillor Lee. Oh, sure, councillor Carper, Langley, and then we'll go to councillor Pike.
So, I guess what key we're looking at is that actually our response cost is just staff time. And if we wanted to budget staff time for response, then we would have to employ staff who would, say essentially sit there waiting for response to happen. But what you would actually end up doing is you'd say, while there was no response, you'd allocate their time to doing BAU. So you'd achieve whatever it was over your BAU. So we felt that it would be more appropriate to say, okay, it's whatever the figure is, I think 15% just seemed to fit reasonably well. Let's make sure when we're planning our work that we plan based on 85% productivity, so that we don't get to the end of the year when there's been a response and the joint committee and can look at the GMO and say, hey, you guys, you're just not hitting your program. So that in a year when there's a response, a typical response, they'll hit their program. In a year when there's not a response, they will actually overachieve and will end up doing more than we. So we thought that was a pragmatic way. We'd hate to have GMO staff sitting there twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do, waiting for a response sort of thing. But so that's what's the Keeg's approach to that.
Yeah.
It was more planning a realistic program rather than planning a full program and then having to say, oh, sorry, we didn't achieve it because, but a report that we've overachieved.
Thank you. Councillor Pike.
Yeah, I guess Langley's comments help add perspective. I was just going to say that there's 4 parts to the civil defence, and that the readiness and the resilience is equally as important as the recovery. So I would hate to think that in achieving the 15% that would be taking away from those parts. But yes, Langley's comments me some comfort. Do you think in doing the 15% we'd still be able to achieve the readiness and resilience as well?
So I guess what we'll do is we'll present to you on an annual basis our program and also the LTP. And if you felt that you, as a joint committee, that you wanted to focus more effort on a particular, or you felt we should be overall producing more effort, then we would increase our resourcing and staff appropriately, so that perhaps we were doing a lot more work on resilience. But we would still suggest to the GMO that we assume that the only 85% effective to cover that response. So that's how we'd hand. If you want us to provide more focus or an increased focus in areas of our activity, then we'd come to you with more budget, but we would still look at an 85% utilisation or effectiveness of the GMO. Makes sense?
Yeah, I guess the other consideration would be following the external reports and some of the recommendation, is our current BAU enough to, or are we actually needing to extend in those areas and therefore need more budget to cover that?
A good question. And it's I've made this comment for to a degree. The effort you put into civil defence is a little bit discretionary, because you can aim for an A+, or given that we know about our communities and affordability, it might be that we just go for a B+ sort of level of effort. So we would achieve a lot more if we had a greater budget, and I know Julian would be very pleased to be able to achieve more. The things like the review we've just had and others give us a level of comfort that as a group we're doing okay. Could we do with more effort going into things like resilience? Absolutely. But where do we draw the line? How do we sort of cut the cloth a bit of it?
Yeah, I guess my feelings would be that I think we probably do need to it's at a time where the environment is, or I feel like we're at a heightened risk. And I would hate to see our budget cut at a time like this. Yeah, I would be leaning towards more of a targeted rate myself, but I'm open to the committee's feelings.
Thank you, councillor Pike. Councillor Buckthorpe, you've got your microphone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was probably along the same lines as Thomas, thinking most things we do in council have a budget attached to it, and you can't deviate from that. Otherwise, it's not transparent. But I understand. After Langley explained it, I can see the benefits of it. The other positive for me on that basis is your 15% option of BAU is sort of inflation proofs that 270 average, because I mean, let's face it, 10 years ago costs were a hell of a lot less than today. So yeah, it uncomplicates it. So I can see the reason behind it. So I'm okay with it.
Any other questions or queries? Yes, Julian.
I obviously listening very carefully, particularly to councillors Pike and Lee, in terms of the concerns there. I think when we bring back the work programme, when we've looked at the reviews and the recommendations, and we've come back with proposed work programme and what we intend to achieve for the next, then that will hopefully give you, if you want, the detail that you're looking for to determine whether that's enough. Because we'll give a couple of options. We can do it on the 100%, and we'll do it on the 85% is the primary one. But if it would be of benefit, we would actually look at it from 100% and see what the difference is. But I would just go back to what Langley said: is if there was no emergencies, you're going to get your 100% even at the 85. It's just a recognition that even if you put 115%, so you increase the budget, if there was an emergency, you're going to lose that. You're going to lose that up to 15%, because that's just the nature. But we'll provide you with two options.
Yeah, and through the chair, councillor Pike, just for some comfort, perhaps, I think that considering there's been a pattern of over 10 years of, it's nearly $3 million over 10 years, which is unbudgeted, that just to give some allowance for not if, but when. And then, as Langley said, like through performance measures, if there are to be no responses, then the VAU are only going to overachieve. But it just gives some comfort, particularly to ratepayers, that we are aware and are being pragmatic and using their dollars in the best way possible. And as we know, like a long-term plan doesn't set your annual budgets. You can make amendments during annual budgets where, maybe the year was a bit light on responses, and all touch wood, that's the way we go. So maybe it might alleviate to 10%, who knows? But I think it's a good way to start, and I'm quite happy to accept the technical expert of KEG that this is probably a good place to start, because we can't keep, I think, doing a good job, but just overspending. I mean, 3 million over 10 years. I mean, it's probably a drop in the bucket compared to what it costs TAs for infrastructure damage and roading and pipes and everything else. So I'm not sure what the view of the rest of the committee members is, because I completely sympathise with Councillor Lee and Pike and where you're coming from, but I just wonder if there's any other commentary. Deputy Mayor Goddard?
We're talking about staff time and how we're allocating staff time. It's not external money. So if we allocate staff time, like there's the flexibility to shift staff time during the year if we need to. So really, I support what's recommended here, that we allocate some staff time towards response and recovery. And if during the year we don't have any of those events, then it gets reallocated back to business as usual.
So Councillor Pike, does that give you some comfort? Right, thank you. Councillor Lee, you're quite happy with that? Fantastic, thank you. So the response and recovery costs recommendation, is that the report? Oh, wrong one. After action review, we've done that one. Yeah, so that the report response and recovery costs 2013 to 2023 be received. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Goddard, Councillor Buckthorpe. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, we now move on to probably quite relevant group priority action status. Julian.
Thank you. This is a standing item to provide the Waikato Civil Defence Group with a high level assurance in relation to the Joint Committee endorsed priority actions. So there are 19 priority actions that we report on. All of those priority actions are either on track or off track with appropriate mitigations in place. None of them are off track with help needed. One area previously reported as off track, but with appropriate mitigation in place, was the work programme delivery of the actions related to the iwi and Maori engagement. There are 3 priority actions connected to that. So where we currently are with that, it's off track with a new plan in place. I'll recall that we're going to have a strategic work plan co-designed with the iwi chairs, or with the iwi executive, to be overseen by yourselves and iwi chairs as standalone work plan. There's been a couple of cancellations or last minute cancellations, unfortunately, for the Tainui Waka Alliance, which I was going to present to and get the green light from the chairs to move forward. So there's another plan in place now that I'm going to go and visit each of the chairs individually rather than waiting for the collective to come together, because the priorities and the moving pieces for those iwi leaders means it's short notice cancellations of those meetings. So there is a plan in place, and we'll move forward. We'll move forward with those, and we'll get that back on track, hopefully in the new year. I think at the moment we were going to hopefully get on the work plan. We were going to get the, I think it was March or April next year, we were going to get the work plan underway. So we're probably looking at around the June time now until that work plan gets developed, by the time I've gone around each of the iwi. So for the eagle-eyed of you, for the rest of them, so previously, or if you look at the status, 7 are on track, 12 are off track, with mitigation plans in place. Last quarter, that was 8 were on track and 11 were off track with mitigation in place. There has been some movement to and from, but the majority of, if you want, the ones that have gone from green to amber are reflected in the recovery space, and the recovery BAU work programme has been impacted by the actual operational recovery activities for the North Island severe weather event. So we are looking at new milestones for that at the moment. They've not quite been set because we're just waiting for the after action review to be endorsed, because some of those impact the work programme. So overall, it's pretty stable, but the work programme, this item will change or be proposed to be changed in terms of those 19 that we're monitoring. They're likely to change the next round when we present to you options for a new prioritised work programme.
Sure, thank you, Julian. Are there any questions for Julian? Okay, Julian, I've just got a couple. With regards to the transformation subcommittee, I would that's obviously a subcommittee of KEG.
It was after COVID. It no longer exists.
Okay, thank you. And I think with point 14 around KEG just a couple of weeks ago, tasking the GMO to undertake an analysis and whatnot, that we just give you some space and look forward to the presentation in March next year. Any further points of clarity or questions for Julian? Nothing you'd like to add, Langley? Good. Okay. The recommendation that the report group priority action status be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Lee. Councillor Nataki, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, we now move on to the KEG meeting summary. Langley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just take the report as read. You can see that our agenda essentially replicates yours. So you've been through all the matters that we discussed, and they have come to you with our recommendations. So unless there's any questions, I have nothing to.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Buckthorpe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to ask when we're likely to see the chair of KEG at one of our meetings.
Okay, I just think that, yes, whilst we do have a new KEG chair, Susan has some personal health issues, which we should all just send her our best wishes and look forward to seeing her in the new year. I understand, but yes, she's had a year with restructure and whatnot. So yes, thank you for that. Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Lee. Thank you. There being none, the recommendation is that the report coordinating executive group meeting summary be received. All those, mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Goddard, Councillor Pike, all those in favour? Against? Carried. And now Matthew and Lily will warmly welcome you for the NEMA update. Hi Matthew, how are you? That's it.
Yep, thank you. So just want to provide, so first of all, my written report can be taken as read with just a couple of additions in the last few days. The first part that I do want to mention is that the Honourable Mark Mitchell MP has now been appointed as the Minister for Emergency Management and Recovery. You will note that the recovery portfolio previously did cover the cyclone recovery unit, and it was separate. It's now been amalgamated to become one portfolio that the Minister will cover. And this has been obviously brought together. The other two updates, in addition to the written statement, I just want to provide some more context with. The Manager for National Operations and National Controller, Roger Ball, recently resigned in October, his last working day. NEMA has then taken the opportunity to actually separate these two positions out, which is the role of National Operations Manager and National Controller. So Wendy Wright, who is NEMA's Strategic Programme Director, has now been appointed for a 2-year period as the National Controller, and AJ Makiji has been appointed as the Acting National Operations Manager position. That is until February this year. In between now and then, there will be a full recruitment process undertaken to recruit a National Operations Manager. The other part I just want to mention is the National Excise Revenue, which is taking place on the 12th of October this year. NEMA issued a warning order to provide advance warning of the exercise. It is a Tier 4 national exercise under the National Civil Defence and Emergency Management Exercise Programme. The group will be invited to participate in that next year. There are 3 key dates. 12th of June, the 26th of June and the 10th of July, with accompanying lead-up activities taking place prior to the main exercise days. And we do encourage and invite the group to participate in as much exercise in between now and then as much as possible. And that's it for my written update edition. Any questions?
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for Matthew on that? So, Julian, you've received the invitation to the dates to the exercise next year?
Yes, and Aaron's well underway in pulling the coordination around that. So all the local EOCs, local authorities, the agencies contribute as well.
Great, thank you very much. There being none, the recommendation is that the report National Emergency Management Agency update be received. Thank you, Councillor Ngātaki. Councillor Buckthorpe, all those in favour? Hence carried. Thank you. And it must be an interesting time right now, Matthew, because with the change in government, you're probably just waiting to see
Yeah.
what happens.
It is a wait and see.
Definitely. So yeah, look forward to catching up in the new year. Thank you very much. Right now, we're going to move into a publicly excluded session, reasons being under the Lagoima Act, Section 7(2)(a), as to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons. So can I have a mover and a seconder for public excluded? Councillor Lee, Councillor Ngātaki, all those in favour? Against, carried. Certainly. Sounds a bit scary.